This is Diana Lang. I'm the executive director and founder of Iowans for Adoption. I'd always dreamt of having many children. However, 3.5 years after giving birth to my son, I was diagnosed with an extremely aggressive type of breast cancer. My cancer doctors told me to not ever get pregnant again. 5 years after my diagnosis, we became a licensed foster family so we could foster and adopt to grow our family. And Ruth was our licensing worker. We've had a bond ever since then because we both have a heart for children and families and consider ourselves to be child welfare advocates.
My name is Ruth Ely, and I have 4 birth children, and I have adopted 18 children, and I have fostered over 90 children in 33 years. That's long-term fostering because I don't count the kids that I did respite care for. I don't count the kids that I did short-term foster care for, or the kids that in short-term would be like less than 6 months, and respite care would be like if you had them less than 30 days. Like if they came in for emergency placement or for when other kids, like if they were placed with somebody else and you did a vacation or an emergency respite, if the police dropped them off, that kind of stuff, because then you'd be in the thousands.
So I was a runaway from a group home I was placed in for therapy. I ran away from there with another girl and we ended up in Cedar Rapids. From there, I was walking around a grocery store in Hy-Vee in Cedar Rapids by myself, and a man approached me and offered me a modeling job. I, at the time, had nowhere else to go and was vulnerable and chose to go with him to do that modeling job, which then turned into being trafficked. I was trafficked between Iowa and Illinois, and then during a sting operation at a hotel in Chicago that I was at, I was found by an undercover police officer and brought back to Iowa. From there, I was placed in the state training school in Toledo, and then after completing that program, about 9 or 10 months, I completed the program and was placed with my first foster home with Ruth, my only foster home. My mom's rights weren't terminated yet, and Ruth wanted to give me my forever family, so she waited until I turned 18 and adopted me. So Ruth showed me what stability was, something that I did not have as a child. She also showed me what unconditional love was, no matter what I did, because when I first moved in with her, I wasn't probably the easiest to deal with. I probably I recall not being the best behavior-wise, and she still loved me. Like there was never a, well, let's send you somewhere else kind of situation. Still wrapped her arms around me and said, I love you, you're mine. My journey to faith began when I moved in with my foster mom, Ruth. She introduced me to Jesus and showed me what his love looks like, but I didn't fully give my life to him at that time. It wasn't until later, during a separation in my marriage, that I want to give the same love and support to people just as my adopted family gave to me.
Okay, so I am Reagan Buckles. So I am adopted by Ruth that spoke before. I wasn't allowed to be with my mom because she had a boyfriend who was abusive and stuff, and so I had actually run away from my mom's house and went to my dad's, and that's how I ultimately ended up having to stay with my dad and being more into the situation than prior to that, because at once upon a time we were all one big happy family. So I was trafficked by my biological father, and all during my childhood. I mean, from a very young age, 3 or 4 years old, until I was removed from the home at 14 and found out my dad had me living with a sex offender. And, they were like, well, you can't do that. When you're a child and that gets taken away from their parents because your parents are told you can't be a parent and be on drugs or not take care of your child or sell your child to fill your drug addiction. You can't, we're taking your child from you. Okay, so then your child is sitting in a shelter and they're calling home and they're like, Mom, Dad, did you talk to the DHS worker? Did you ask them what you have to do so I can come home? And they're like, yeah, she said we have to pass a drug test. We have to come to therapy sessions with you. Okay, so when are we going to do that? When are you going to do that? Okay, my parents I went to foster care 8th grade year, and I was adopted at the age of 17, and I mean, they never ever dropped a single UA, let alone a clean UA. They came to maybe 2 therapy sessions ever. I mean, so I already felt like I wasn't worth it. Like, okay, I'm a child. Like, they don't give a crap about me. They're not even trying to get me to come, like, to let me come home. Like, they're not doing anything. And so then going in shelter, sitting there waiting for somebody else to want you, and going through 6, 7, 8 families that are like, no, we'll pass, we'll wait for the next one. That really mentally breaks you down. And it, like, that's hard to heal from. As a child going through that, like, I mean, children are, like, that's the sculpting age. You know, like, how you treat that child like, how you treat children, that's going to shape that person for the rest of their life. Like, I am a survivor of shit. My grandmother and my mom were being used against me in terms of their medical care. So they were being, if you tell anybody what I'm doing to you, I'm not going to let your grandma and your mom go to the doctor and have their medicine anymore. So, I mean, those are the only 2 people in my world that I cared about. So then I didn't say, I kept pretty quiet until my grandma died. 14 years of trafficking that at the time, I didn't know I was even trafficking. My dad was selling me for his addictions. I was an abused little girl whose parents didn't love her enough to give a shit. Didn't care enough to let her come home, do anything. And then one day this woman says, no, honey, that's not it. This is what happened. And it put a whole different perspective on all of it, because then the day that my mom explained to me that I was trafficked and I wasn't just a victim of child abuse anymore, I was no longer, I mean, I was like, a weight was gone, because it was like, not putting a title to it made, like, set me free, but just like, I wasn't a victim anymore. Putting that title, like, I was trafficked, but that meant that I wasn't a victim of child abuse anymore. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a survivor of being trafficked. I'm a survivor of the system.
I'll always hug my mom. I don't get to hug my mom enough. Like, I feel like I could use a mom hug every day. Every day. And I never get that. You're the best. Oh, I miss you.
Like, I've had some really low lows. And, like, I think I can really say that I think I've actually made my mom a little bit proud of how far I've come. I was 19 years old. I mean, was not ready to be a mom. I was in a really, really abusive relationship. And I mean, in terms of, like, he was physically abusive, he was mentally abusive. I mean, it was bad. And I found out I was pregnant, barely an adult, and, an abusive relationship. When I first went into foster care, my brother and her were going to originally try to get custody of me, and because she wanted to be a parent, she wanted to be a mom. That's all she's ever wanted. And I knew in my heart, by the way, I mean, the whole time I was in foster care, she would drive from Des Moines to Marshalltown every single weekend, rain or shine, snow, whatever. And she would pick me up on Saturday morning and bring me home Sunday night, just so I could have an overnight with her and my brother. So I mean, like, when it came to what am I going to do with this baby, thinking to myself, Ashlyn is the perfect person. She's my sister, and maybe she'll know what to do. Maybe she can help me figure out how to get away from here or whatever, And then it wasn't ideal time to try to get me away, because she lived in Colorado. So Ashlyn was like, would you let me adopt your baby? And she was like, you'll still be part of her life. You'll be Aunt Reagan instead of mommy. You'll be Aunt Reagan, and you'll see her, you'll talk to her, you'll be a full part of her life, just like you're still my sister and you're still part of my life. Nothing's going to change just because I adopt your baby. And I mean, that was a relief. I mean, that was huge relief. And so I mean, I was pregnant and already going into that with that whole adoption plan thing like my mom was talking about. If you're scared, you don't know what to do, you're pregnant, you feel alone, you're in an abusive relationship, you can't tell the dad, you can't tell your parents, whatever the situation is, there's always an option. Like there's always an option, and it's always than putting that baby through hell in a toxic home. Because I mean, I know my daughter speaks sign language and French and English, and she is in first grade, and that is impressive. And I know damn well I couldn't have done that for her. So if you're in that situation, don't be afraid to reach out. You never know how close somebody is that will be able to do that for you. I mean, it was as simple as my sister, my ex-sister-in-law, whatever you want to call her. I mean, it was one phone call, and she had one conversation with her spouse about it, and it was a set plan going through the motions. I mean, when I went into labor, she came to the hospital, and so she was the parent in the hospital, and then I was discharged. As soon as I was cleared, I was discharged, and she was staying in the hospital with the baby. And she named the baby and everything. I mean, because we planned it all from pregnancy, she was never, in my mind, when you do the pregnancy plan way, you don't get that emotional attachment that you normally would as a mother, to the child, to make you not want to give the child away. But if you go, first thing when you find out you're pregnant and you're not going to be able to do it, you can't take care of that baby, the best thing you can do is find somebody that really, really wants to. Really, it brings so much joy to my life every time I get a message on my phone from them. I see a picture of Mia. She calls, she leaves me voice messages while I'm at work, and she's like, "Hi, Aunt Reagan." And it's just now she knows, you're my mom. Ashlyn's my mommy, but I came from Aunt Reagan's tummy because mommy was sick. And that's her mindset about it. But I'm still a very active part of her life. Mia succeeding, being brought up in an amazing freaking world. I mean, she's a phenomenal little girl. So I gave my first one up for adoption to my sister, and so she's now.
Now that you've heard these brief stories, please join us in our efforts to build families, educate others about adoption, host events, change laws, and most importantly, to ensure that all children have a permanent, safe, loving, nurturing, stable family that contributes to their overall positive health and well-being.